He went on a 3-week video game bender that cost him his health, job, and wife.
Every time I find something new to hang up here, I feel like I'm bit by bit getting closer to finally blocking out all of the sunlight from ever reaching my room. Some might say that's not very healthy, but hey, you know what they say, right? Too much sun causes skin cancer or something terrifying like that, so me as well, we just block all of it out, slowly turn into an immortal vampire, and that way I can actually become the magical time wizard some people seem to think that I am. But yes, welcome back guys, hope you all have been doing good, and today is the day after Comiket. I too have, as you can see, survived that pilgrimage death battle that happens twice every single year. Back at you again with another after Comiket week review, because as you can imagine, when you gather thousands of weird people together into a single place, granted some people are eventually gonna do some really weird shit, sometimes really interesting in good ways, and sometimes it just ain't the best, let's put it that way. So I figured we could go over some of the interesting things that happened this time. First off, we can go through the top 5 series. This time we're going through it at the very start of the video, simply because I feel like we have reached that point where there isn't really as much to talk about with the top 5 anymore. Because as you can imagine, the top 2, I guess the top 3 are exactly the same as before. Yep, it's just Blue Archive VTubing as well as Uma Musume. Now, some people might wonder, I think, maybe I'm just the only one thinking and wondering this to myself. You know, it's not good to listen to the voices in your head, but for once, maybe it helped to like bring up the important question, why VTubing is the only one among all the top 5 series listed here that is not exactly its own thing. And the reason why is because of the fact that typically when it comes to like Doujin content for the VTubing space, it's a little less straightforward in the sense that it's not as easy to say like, yes, these are the people that make Hololive only, these are the people that make Niji-Sanji content only, or these are the indie VTubers who are actually trying to use this as an opportunity to break out from the space. Typically, it can vary to some extent, and as a result, you know, sometimes there may be a few crossings of lines that makes it a little harder to figure out which genre to place the thing under, and so it's just easier overall to just have it be just VTubing in general. Interestingly enough, this time around, all of these actually saw a net increase in the number of circles for each of them across the board compared to last Comiket. And what I mean by this is that overall, compared to last Comiket, I think there was an increase in about 4,000 to 5,000 booth spaces overall. I don't know what exactly caused this. I'm guessing it's more of just them wanting to ensure that last time around, because it was summer, they kind of wanted to ensure that people are spaced out a little more so that they don't overheat in the venue itself. They kind of reduce the number of circles perhaps, and so as the amount of space increased, the amount of space that each of these series took up also increased, although not necessarily proportionally, which also led to some interesting changes in how they were actually like set up within the venue itself, because proportionally, I think VTubing as an entirety saw more of an increase compared to Blue Archive. Like both saw an increase still compared to like all the years prior, but the thing is that VTubing saw a slightly bigger increase, and as a result, instead of being in the West Hall like it was the last time around, this time they were given their own dedicated hall on day 2 within the East 7, I think, which is typically separated on its own in a completely different building from all of the other halls. And it's also closer to the cosplay booths, which I don't know if there's any specific reason they did that, but it was kind of cool to see that like this space has gotten so big that now it can actually occupy its own little building. That said, with Blue Archive, while it didn't get its own completely separate building, it feels like it just has reached that point where, because it's still graining in size, it's a little difficult to put them into a single location. Like if you were to put them into the West Halls, it feels like it's in this weird space where it's neither here nor there, where it will take up too much of the hall and then everything else has to trickle over into a different hall, which makes it hard to split things by genre. And if you were to put them into like 7, it's too small to fit all of them, so they kind of are just occupying an entire part of the East Hall now. I think it was about 1 and about a half or a third of in East Hall, so it has gotten quite a lot bigger in size compared to the past. Meanwhile, Uma Musume is still growing as well, which is the one that probably boggles my mind the most, because it is still the one series among all of these top 5 where you're not allowed to make NSFW content for the series, so it's actually still just like chugging on and growing in size and popularity, it would seem, at least when it comes to the fan-made content for it, in spite of the fact that people know and are willing to like cooperate with this restriction. So the amount of growth and the amount of content that people produce for the series is always very interesting to see, to me at least. Then when it comes to the 4th and 5th, this is the only part where we actually see some form of change in the rankings, in that Idolmaster actually fell out of the rankings in Comiket 104, and I think Fate was actually 4th at the time. However, the series that apparently ended up 5th that time, which was Toho, apparently actually fell out of the top 5 this time around. I think they were actually 6th, so still very close to the top. And instead, Idolmaster actually went all the way to 4th, and it pushed Type Moon down to the 5th instead. And the interesting thing, perhaps maybe sad thing for some people, is that Type Moon was probably the only series among the top 5 here where the number of circles, even though it increased compared to Comiket 104, it actually didn't see a overall like trended increase, in the sense that compared to Comiket 103 as well, when you compare 103 to 104, the number of circles actually fell from 103 to 104, in part because of the natural disasters that were occurring at the period of 104. So this means that an increase from 104 to 105 is more or less to be expected for most of the series. But Type Moon was the only one where when you compare it to Comiket 103, the second most recent Comiket, it actually saw a net decrease in the total number of circles. But it's still impressive to see that while the game is about to hit its 10th anniversary only next year, they're actually still seeing quite a lot of people supporting them in terms of the fan-made content for the series as well. You may have noticed as well, but this is probably the first Comiket in quite a long while where it actually does not end on the 31st of December. And what I mean by this is that usually the way Comiket is run, it lasts through the last few days of the year. So for example, if the Comiket was 3 days, it would last from the 31st to the 29th. I'm going in reverse. I do not know why I'm doing that. My brain seems to be in a little bit of a state of disarray, but basically in that sense, right, 29th to the 31st used to be the norm for a 3-day Comiket. And for the past few years after the pandemic, it has been 30th, 31st all the way, because it's the last 2 days of the year. And this year, it's actually on the 29th and the 30th. So the 31st has no Comiket, which has led some articles to call it a year without a New Year's Eve Comiket, because it is just that uncommon for this to actually happen. For reference, I think this has only happened maybe like 14 times across the 100 plus Comikets that have been organized. And the last time that it has actually happened was in 2014, if I'm not mistaken. So even then, it's been 10 years since the last time this has happened. It's kind of like a leap year, except even more extreme, which makes me feel even older, because this means that I have basically been around long enough to actually see both of these happen. As to why this exactly happened, no one really knows either. It's probably due to some internal like back-end discussions between the committee as well as the people who own the site itself, that maybe it was just something about like them not being able to hold an event this year during the New Year's Eve, or maybe they just don't want to, and specifically, so the committee just had no choice but to push it forward a day. Or maybe it was the committee that wanted to push it forward so that they have more time after that to actually rest, because this is also one of the rare few years where basically if your company gives you the standard end of year break, you can have what people are calling the miracle 9-day holiday, because by virtue of how the days of the year line up, if your company gives you the standard, like let's say 3 or 4 days of the year off and the 3 days after, it would line up well enough that you will basically have a 9 straight public holiday without having to take any days off. So people are quite excited about that. So admittedly, some people may have actually really wanted for this event to not be on the 31st, so that they can actually have a long break off and actually like enjoy it with the family, go on a holiday or whatnot. Even people within the company I'm working in that has like a booth at Comiket, they were actually talking about like how this is actually kind of exciting for them as well, since they can actually spend New Year's Eve at home with their loved ones. Otherwise, they'll be in like the Comiket venue until like maybe the end of the day, and then to go back, if they stay in like Osaka or something, for example, they would have to take a 3-hour train ride all the way back, so they don't really get to celebrate New Year's Eve with their family. So for them, this is something that's quite happy as well. And the extended break means they can actually take the time to like go camping or travel overseas, which many people are also looking forward to, and I'm guessing that's why they made it this way this year instead. Next up, initially when I thought when we would go into winter, we would see a lot less of the weird people doing like weird negative shit. In the video for the summer Comiket, we talked about like I think 2 or 3 cases of stuff like that happening. And the thing is that I thought that since the weather was gonna get colder, people would quite literally chill and stop doing all of these weird things or at least not on the same level anymore. And well, thankfully, we didn't get any people doing things that would be considerable a crime at least. I feel like the fact that this is even a bar in the first place is a lot of worrying, but yeah, the fact of the matter is things did get a little better. Although, while we don't have Friren guy this time around making a fuss, I present to you Makeheroine guy. So the thing with this one, like a couple of things, right? First up, this guy is probably just doing this like intentionally as a haha funny like throwback to the Friren thing. And there are multiple reasons why I say this. First is like the way he speaks, like his inflection and all of that. It sounds very exaggerated in the sense that it doesn't have the same visceral like emotion that the guy who did the Friren one did. And there's also the fact that when you look at how he was reacting to everything around him, he wasn't as emotionally charged as you would expect someone in that position to be. Like when he tried to run back into the queue and the guy just literally grabbed him and pulled him out, which I don't think anything like that aggressive was actually happening during the Friren one. At least we didn't see it physically happen in the clips that people took of it. But this time around, you could literally see like the guy who was standing in the back there. Like his eyes were just going dead serious as he pulled the guy away for like a few times and just stared at him. But the guy was just completely irresponsive to that person himself. And the thing is that when the staff actually came to try to stop him, he seemed very easily suppressed. Like the staff literally was just following him around with his hands raised in the air. Like the reason why the staff does this is because of the fact that it was part of their standard operating procedure in a sense where you basically put your hands in the air and follow the guy around so that you can actively show in case anyone's recording a video that you are not directly doing anything to the guy like preemptively. Like as long as the guy isn't like doing anything that might be considered a problem, you aren't like doing anything that could be considered you punching or bumping him and causing him to fall. And that's why they do this. It's basically the same thing that you see in like very old videos of people boarding the trains where they would do this so that they can show that they're not like trying to grope anyone on the trains. It's a bit of a weird thing in a way, but with Comiket, there's also another reason why they actually raise their hands up in the air, and it's because of the fact that while they want to show that they aren't actually doing anything to the guy before he does anything, it's also so that when they get close to the guy, if the guy does actually do something, they can immediately swing their hands down and grab the guy in a vice lock so that he can't actually escape either. And that's basically part of why they just followed the guy around, like raising their hands in the air like some fucking monk from Age of Empires 2 or something. It almost feels like somehow by raising his hands in the air, the staff was just wallowing him into submission or something. Also, if I may add, bro was in actual sandals for the entire time he was out there doing this whole bit. I guess he actually went there like this, but the fact that he's out in like single-digit degree temperatures and fucking sandals, and the fact that like it's not just even like, oh haha, he might be one of those Finnish people who actually just have a very strong resistance to cold or something. There's also the fact that he is doing this in the middle of Comiket, an event where there are so many people constantly moving around at the same time. Like, the thing is that even if you are very well and like fine with the cold, there's also the fact that if you're going to be moving around within the crowd, there's a very real chance of people trampling on your feet as well. It's part of the reason why when I go for Comiket, I'm always making sure to actually have on fairly thick and like heavy duty boots instead, because I don't want my feet to get turned into fucking grape juice when like walking through the event. And the thing is that especially with like some of the people, especially with the timing that I go in, is that people are queuing outside of the site from like 4:30 a.m. all the way till the opening time. So there are always gonna be people who, especially by the later half of the day, are gonna be extremely exhausted and like their brain's just gonna be out of it. Like if you walk through the event, I'm sure you'll also realize it, but there are plenty of people who just turn into complete assholes at that point because they're just so exhausted they can't even think about like being nice to others, which kind of speaks to their character, I feel like, but let's not judge them for now. The fact of the matter is that people tend to be more likely to bump and therefore trample on you, and like going around in just sandals when people are carrying like 10 kg loads on their back, maybe even 20 or 30, and just like walking around and potentially just going like, ugh, makes it feel like going there in sandals is kind of insane. Either way, what I'm trying to say for all this is, don't be this guy. We don't know if he's actually faking it. It looks like he's faking it very much, but either way, whether or not he's faking it, don't do this at the event. I feel like it doesn't need to be said. Like, even if it's for a meme, don't go doing this in the middle of the event venue. You want to do this, go cosplay the guy, do it in the cosplay area as a bit, right? Make it into a cosplay bit instead. Don't do it where people are actually actively trying to queue for things that they want, and you're just going to cause trouble, not just for the staff who, when you have to basically run over and try to worry about what's going on and try to suppress the guy potentially. Like, this additional stress on the staff who are probably already tired, because remember, the staff at this event are mostly volunteers. This guy who had to stand there and wallow at him the entire time might just be a random dude who volunteered to be there. He may not even be paid for this. Next up, when it comes to the corporate booths, there was no MiHoYo this year. The company that made Reverse was also not there. So some of the bigger Chinese games that appeared the last time around and like caused quite congestion aren't there this time around. Instead, you had WoWa, the Wuthering Waves, that actually took up a decently big space this time around for their celebration as well. As well as Nikkei was actually there with a much bigger booth. I think this might actually be the biggest booth that Nikkei has actually had in Comiket like they have ever seen till now. Still not as big as the booths they have in other events though. I'm pretty sure the one that I saw in the Nico Nico Chokaigi was way bigger still than this and more extravagant. Although they did have like mini games at the back, they had the cosplaying area with like a full-on display this time around. So it was pretty cool to see the booths that all of these companies were setting up this time. On top of that, this was probably the first time in a long while that I think I've seen like Bandai Namco not actually sell anything at the event. So that's another first that this event has probably brought back for us. And part of that was just because of the fact that they basically took their entire booth space and turned it into a Gakuen Idolmaster like live display zone instead. Really feels like they're going like just completely knee deep into like the marketing for the series. Like, it actually is kind of terrifying to see how much they have put into marketing the Gakuen Idolmaster series compared to how little they actually did for Shiny Colors initially when it first released. And you could basically go and take on a mini activity to like roll a gacha and get a little hat if you actually roll well and didn't get skill issued by the gacha there. Sadly, all of my gacha luck, it seems it has gone into playing like mahjong with you guys on stream once in a while, so all of the luck basically just poofed out of existence, so didn't manage to get the funny hat that they had for all the gacha masters there. But I did manage to get the bag that you see over there, which they were basically giving out for free. Now, the thing with the bags is that usually most companies always give this out, but the thing is that apparently this was the first time where the bags were actually apparently like mishandled. I guess the logistics of it were kind of mishandled. So what happened was at the end of the first day, someone actually made a mention in a tweet that some people who they suspected to have been scalpers probably like took a whole bunch of these, used it to like basically load all of their scalp goods, and then they just randomly littered all of it within the hall itself. So I guess the interesting thing with all of this is that Bandai Namco, the company that is known for usually taking very long to respond to anything, actually respond to this really quickly if anything. And they actually, on the second day of the event, instilled a restriction that not only could you only have one of the bags, but they would actually check and make sure that you only physically had one bag on you before they would give you another bag. So they tried to make it as difficult as possible for people to scalp the bags. And in order to get the bags, you didn't just go to a person who was just randomly giving it out. Instead, you had to queue and go to the back of the stage and get it at the back of the stage before coming back out. So in a way, they were trying to make it as difficult as possible for people to abuse the system and ensuring that as many people as possible actually got to get the bags instead. So that was pretty interesting. Also for YoStar, instead of having their usual booth where they actually like showed off all the different IPs at once, this time around they had one specifically for the new IP, which is the one over there for Stera Sora. So the entire booth was just an experience zone where you can go in and just look at the key visuals for the game. And it's kind of surprising how much art they have prepared for it. The only thing is that the art feels very familiar for some reason. Like, everything looks like I've seen it somewhere before in a way. Like, I'm not saying that as a diss or something, it's just that it feels very different from everything they've done till now. And like going through it, it was very difficult for me to then get a sense of like what exactly they were trying to do with this IP, if that makes any sense. Like, typically when you look at the key visuals for a game, when you go into like, they talk about like what they are trying to introduce to you, typically not only would they show you like, well, this is what the characters look like, but this is what the world looks like, this is the type of world and like world building we're trying to do. So if you're interested in the plot side of the story of the game, you can kind of look at all of the stuff there and be like, okay, I kind of know what this is about. But for this one, it really feels like going through all of it, all I can really say is that, yeah, characters, they look kind of cute. They remind me a little bit of some of Yostar's other games, but I don't know like what exactly it is about. So I guess we'll have to see when the game actually comes out what it ends up being. Hopefully it's interesting, but for now, yeah, I'll probably just, all I can really say is that the event didn't give me a good sense of what it was about, but it felt fun to walk through the booth nonetheless, because all the characters did look pretty cute and kind of familiar and funny in a way. But yeah, aside from that, the corporate booth area feels like fairly similar-ish to the other years in the sense that all of the visual novel companies are back. I feel like I mentioned it the last 2 times as well. Alicesoft was celebrating their 35th anniversary, so that was pretty cool to see them like set up all of that, and like there was actually a guy on the speaker there like announcing that it was the 35th and thanking everyone, not just the people in the queue, but just like thanking everyone for the fact that they could even be here in the first place. So that was kind of heartwarming. I think Visual Arts was also there pushing for like their Heaven Burns Red live stage. Unfortunately, they were completely banning filming of it, so I didn't film the stage itself, but they were apparently pushing the collab with Ghost State Monsters from Angel Beats, which is a very boomer series, I think. Like it pains me to like consider the fact that like when I go on stream and sometimes I talk to people and I'm like, oh yeah, you know Angel Beats, and then like half the people there are like, I have never watched that before, and it just goes like inside my kokoro, it just goes like shit, am I that old? But yeah, aside from that, like going through the event this time around, also one thing I realized is that it does seem like I saw like quite a few times the staff actually bringing wheelchairs around, and I did hear quite a few people talking about like how people are going down during the event. And yeah, there's one thing with winter that I feel like needs to be addressed just in case, because with winter, typically the event tends to be more manageable by my very biased perspective, at least in the sense that I feel like the cold is a lot easier to handle than the high temperatures, which because like if you know how to keep your body temperature regulated, it's easier and less strenuous since you tend to perspire less as well. And so it's easier to like keep warm. You can just go into a building, maybe just get a hot drink and just drink that, and you can easily keep yourself warm, especially within all the other people. Because the more people gather together, the more the temperature goes up. So it's easier to keep warm than it is to like keep cool in summer. But at the same time, because of how big the temperature change can be outside and within the venue, you kind of need to be careful of how much temperature can change. And so you kind of want to ensure that you wear clothing that can be easily put on and removed in a way. Not all of it, of course. You get thrown out of the venue if you do that, unless you're like a cosplayer, I guess. But for the most part, you want to have at least some level of clothing that can be easily removed, so that when you do actually go into the hall and things start to increase in temperature, especially if you don't leave the hall much, you don't eventually just like get a heat injury conversely in the hall because you're just sweating buckets in your like very thick jacket as like people are like scrunching you from all sides this time around. So yeah, stay safe during these events if you do go for them. Know when to get actual cold drinks as well, because while it is the case that like while you're outside, you probably want something warm to keep your body temperature regulated. But that said, I think that's about all that I'm really going to talk about when it comes to interesting things that happened during the event. So we'll go into the stuff that I bought out there at least, or at least some of it. Because for me, part of why I would like to do this videos is also to show that like, hey, you know, it's not just about like Guna content that people go to Comiket. There's many interesting things that people do make that you can get at the event, and that's what makes it interesting to go visit it, walk around and look for interesting stuff as well. So first up, no, I'm not taking off my jacket because it's cold this time around. It's actually like, no, not because it's hot. In fact, it's actually kind of cold removing it, but it's because motherfuckers. Yeah, I can't really see what it looks like because the hood is completely covering my face, but I did manage to find this like really cute like Izuna blanket hood thing that Japan really likes, where it's like it works as both a blanket in a sense for your upper torso as well as a hood to cover your head in case you get cold. Unfortunately, I don't think the ears are very visible unless I do something like this, but if I do it like this, I can't actually see the camera, so I don't even know if I'm looking in the right direction right now. Hopefully I am, but either way, yeah, it was pretty cool that they actually made something like this, and the level of detail that went into all of it, both in terms of the coloring of the patterns that are usually on her kimono, as well as the art itself, all of it. Like even all the little details on the hood as well, with like the little fluff ball and her little like kitsune mask as well. I do like how much detail went into it. And the material that's used for this stuff is usually quite comfortable as well. It's really soft. It kind of feels like you're touching like felt or something, which is probably what it feels like to fluff a fox ghost tail, I would imagine. No, I don't have a problem. All that in the very same booth also had a little like enma as well, like it's the thing that you use to write your wishes on at the shrines within Japan. Except that this one is supposed to bless my RNG, which might help with the gacha, although I highly doubt it, because I do seem to be cursed by whatever like luck demon plagues the gacha world. As well as a nice little illustration book and a postcard as well. The set that he sold also came with a pin badge as well as a acrylic keychain. And the thing with all of this is that these two things plus the book and the postcard was only like 1,000 yen, so really affordable overall, quite fair bit. This was 5,000, so this is a little expensive, but even then, it's just interesting how much more affordable the fan-made stuff at these events are. Aside from that, another thing that's probably not going to help my case on trying to say that I didn't get dropped in my head and that gave me a love for Fox Girls is the fact that there's this Korean artist that does like some very funny art for the very same character over there, and it's like he does the funny art. I think those who follow the community might have actually seen it before. He actually came down for this year's Comiket, which it was kind of interesting to see, like especially for Blue Archive in particular. It does feel like it's probably the first time I've seen an IP actually pull in this many artists from overseas to come to Japan to also sell the event. I guess in a sense, because of the fact that it's a Korean IP, it kind of has quite a big like Korean following, and it does seem that this is probably one of the first few series in Korea that actually got its own massive Doujin community as well. And it does seem like many of the big names there, like Blue Sechi that last time I talked about, as well as some of these people are also all coming to Japan for Comiket to like set up booths as well. So it's kind of interesting to see that it's becoming more international overall, and that people from all over the world can come to this event, not just to like look around and buy stuff for the things that they love, but to even like participate as actual booth set-uppers, the creator side of things as well. Aside from that, I did help someone else to purchase this book as well, but I did get myself a copy as well. It's the fact that the creator of, I guess, the art designer for the characters in Disgaea, he actually attends many of the Comikets and actually sells his own illustration book there as well. So I actually do like purchase them almost every other year. And there's someone else for now who actually wants me to help purchase it as well. So I'm just like purchasing for both me and that person. But like it's really cool, like some of the stuff that you can find there. This is all ages art book. You can really see that their style really has maintained across the years, even after the Disgaea has started to release a lot less frequently. There's also a bit of a short like actual like Doujin comic in the back here as well. Like the fact that like he's putting all of this, like this is basically a compilation of a few of his books in one. But the fact that you basically get like all of this from arguably someone who was quite a big, and in a way his art is probably beloved by quite a lot of people thanks to his work in some games as well. Creator just like casually selling books at the event, to me it's really something that's very interesting as well. And that's the thing with many like games, or especially like the older games in the scene, is that they would typically just get a fairly popular artist to come in and help with the project. And so while the artist may or may not necessarily be a part of the company, he probably still releases his own works at Comiket as well. And so especially with like the VTubers now, many of them, their artist actually goes there and creates content as well, like doujin content, sometimes off the very VTuber that they're supposed to be the official creator of. And so it kind of makes this very obviously like weird blurred line between what's official and fan-made goods. But you can find a lot of very popular artists at the event just releasing content, and to me that's also another interesting thing about how these artists are embroiled into the whole like fan content creation segment of within Japan as well. Aside from that, I did get something else that really triggered the nostalgia old man brain in me, which is that for those of you who know, there's this like doujin group from way back in the day that made a game called Recettear, right, called Easy Game Studio. Apparently they were actually at Comiket this time around, which for quite a decent amount of time they actually have not been attending, or even when they did attend, it was in a very small capacity, typically just selling their new titles and the like. But this time around they were actually selling a celebration pack for Recettear as well, including some of the older stuff. Like they actually had a clear file as well as a acrylic figure. Unfortunately the acrylic figure had already sold out when I got there, but they did have quite a few of their older titles, including Recettear as well as Shatterai. No, it's not Nihongo. I don't know best how to pronounce it, but yeah, this is a very old game. It's so old in fact, and I think this is actually the original like physical copy, because as you can see over here, the supported systems ends at Windows Vista if anything. So yeah, it's really cool. Like I'm really very happy about this. Like just seeing them at the event itself was already quite a happy thing for me, since this game made a lot of impact, and as did some of the other titles on me as a young person back in the day. So the fact that I could actually like get a physical copy of this finally, which I can now like put up on display somewhere in my room, is something that I'm really happy about. If I'm not mistaken, they also did mention that they are creating a HD remake of Recettear, and I did see like the screenshots as well as the displays that they were showing there for the thing itself. I think they also mentioned on their Twitter or they sent some visuals of what the remake for the HD version would look like, and so that's really cool to see. I probably will be buying it just because this game, even till today, I would say it's actually fairly difficult and it's very interesting, and as one of those very rare few like dungeon crawler shop management simulators, which actually does both fairly well. And yeah, I'll be definitely excited to see what happens with the HD remake. One other Blue Archive related thing I found that was actually kind of interesting was like just in the middle of the entirety of the Blue Archive area, I just found this random circle which basically actually had a bunch of like frame artworks there. And at first I was wondering what was even going on, and then I went in to look at it and I realized that the guy basically had made a bunch of fucking oil paintings for Blue Archive and was just selling them each at like 50,000 yens. That was really expensive. I can see why, because they were actually massive in size and they look really good. It's just that they were really expensive as well. So yeah, unfortunately I didn't have the budget at the time, nor the logistical capability to carry that home, so I didn't purchase it. But I did purchase the mini like art set, or I guess his Comiket little like art book set as well. Like the art style is probably very different from what most people are probably used to, but like it's really difficult to get across how like interesting it looks, just because of the fact that especially up close the oil painting strokes are a lot more obvious, as well as all of the little nuances that go into the way that the strokes are applied onto it as a result. Also, one cool thing about it is the fact that even though this is like it looks like a standard plastic bag, but like when you, well, I guess paper bag, but when you open it, it actually looks kind of like this. Yeah, everything is just fitted into this little like diamond shape over here. There's the art book, really cool. Everyone's favorite gamer. More of everyone's favorite gamer. And on this side, it's a little tough to see because of the lighting, but it's basically the Hoshino from the first chapter, I think, where she was like captured and all. It's really hard to see because of the light reflecting off of it. But yeah, overall, their art actually looks pretty awesome. Like, it's mostly just art illustrations instead, but I do find the style to be really sick, so I'm glad I got it. Also, I like how at the very base of the box as well, it's just like his face. It's like, he sees you when you're sleeping, he knows when you're awake. Yeah, I mean, we're already past that season of the year, so I guess we're in the new year, so it hasn't even come yet. But yeah, overall, really cool both. I'm glad I found it. But yeah, aside from that, I feel like, especially in recent years, I have found like this level of like, especially when it comes to the OC content, like stuff that I really enjoy and that I buy every single time. So there is a part of my budget that goes to that, but I don't want to keep talking about the same circles over and over again as well. So as far as possible, I try to keep it fresh here with all of this like different circles that I come across for the first time. So if you're wondering, in case anyone actually does wonder, yes, I do still buy the stuff I usually used to, like many of the circles that I introduced in the past, like the one with their Bancho series, the one with Shizuku, right, the Inkia Ojo-sama, I still follow every single time. Urode, who did the very like picture book-ish style for like the Blue Archive artwork as well. Like I do follow all of them still, and I still do purchase their stuff whenever they turn out at the event. Yeah, kind of want to show all the different stuff I purchase. And speaking of different stuff I purchase, something completely out of left field, I actually bought a mechanical key, like the key that you put on your keyboard, I suppose, except that this one is a Christmas cake, because yes, once again, during the event, it's not just anime stuff, like all the different hobbies, like the train people, the military fans, the keyboard, or like just tech nerds in general with their like, I'm gonna make my own like super cool like coolant fan and show it off at the event. Like all of these people are also at the event showing off their stuff, and so I actually walked through that area and I actually saw this, and it actually kind of reminded me of how like for the past 3 to 4 years, I've told myself every single year that this is the year I'm actually gonna remember to buy a Christmas cake. And then I forget it every single year, and I figured like, you know what? I'm gonna buy this, I'm gonna put it on a key on my keyboard. It's gonna be very obstructive, as you can imagine, because like this is way like bigger than your standard keyboard key, right? Like I'm gonna be putting this on the keyboard, and then like every time you want to push the button, you're gonna have to be touching like this entire like very like bumpy ass set of ingredients on the cake. So I felt like it would be really funny to have this, because if I set this on a very important key, then every time I want to push the key, I'll push it and I'll be like, why does this feel so weird? And then I'll look at it and I'll be like, okay, yeah, don't forget this year to get your fucking Christmas cake. I can still use this thing like people use their fidget spinners, right? And I just go like, yeah. I guess I could just like fidget with it quite a fair bit whenever I feel like I'm bored or like waiting for something to happen. Needless to say, it makes a little bit of a click sound, so it might give it away if I'm like doing a chat with someone. But at the very least, you know, when I'm really bored while playing like, I don't know, Surf or something, and like I'm waiting like 57 eons to pass for my turn to come, I can just sit there and tap this while waiting. For those of you who follow information about the event quite a fair bit, yeah, so Comiket is still like, it's hard to say like what the biggest issue of why it's not growing like super big to the point where it used to be prior to the, like a part of me thinks that it might also be the fact that they are restricting the number of people who can enter, but it does seem like the number of people who are attending each year is increasing slightly over time, so we might get to that point in the future. I do worry about how the logistics are going to end up when it does get to that point, since I don't think this system is built to really handle like 200,000 people coming for the event, all while you're still going to charge them for tickets. But if they stop charging for tickets, people might start camping overnight again. So it's kind of hard, I feel like, unless they're really willing to like go and double down on a way that can restrict entry to prevent people from abusing the queuing system and doing illegal shit like queuing overnight. But yeah, I guess we'll have to see how the committee decides to do it, since they do tend to be very nebulous and fickle in the way they do things, so no one really knows how or what they plan aside for the committee itself. But that said, I guess that gives me more stuff to talk about in the future, so we'll leave that till then. But until next time, take care and bye-bye.